remind by putting two stories together that enable a very important question to arise. And the first is that story about the Buddhist seeker after enlightenment who greatly venerated the godly saint Ashoka. So he decided to drop his worldly life and go to the mountains to attempt to invoke this great being. So he went up to the mountains and he meditated and he chanted and he called upon this saint. And he was there for 12 years and nothing happened. Not even a glimmer of the saint appeared to him. So disheartened, he went down and he was on his way into the town when on the side of the road, sitting in front of his house, was this man, and he was rubbing a piece of steel with a feather. And the seeker asked the man, "What are you doing?" And the man said, "Well, I'm a tailor and I'm making a needle out of this piece of metal." Well, the seeker thought to himself, even in a lifetime this man is not going to be able to make a needle out of this piece of steel with a feather, and yet he's still diligently at his task. And look at me, I give up so easily. So back he went to the mountain again. And again he invoked, and again he called and prayed and chanted. But another 12 years passed. Not a glimmer, not a filament of light appeared to him of this saintly being. So again, disheartened, he went down, and again on his way into the village he saw a man digging a hill. And he'd only just made a little dent in the side of the hill, and he asked the man, "Well, what are you doing?" And the man said, "Well, my house is behind this hill and it's blocking all the light from coming into my garden, so I'm removing the hill." And the seeker thought to himself, "Well, look at this man in lifetimes he's not going to be able to move this hill, and yet still he's at his task, and look at me, I give up." So back up the mountain he went, and again he sat and invoked, and again years passed, and again nothing happened. So totally disillusioned and disheartened, he came down the mountain again, and as he was walking along the road into town, on the side of the road there was a dog, and this dog had either been diseased or been knocked by a passing cart, and its rear legs were totally crumbled and it was being eaten away by maggots. But the dog was still yapping at the carts that were going by and the people that were passing. And as the seeker looked, a great wave of compassion came over him. Here was this dog, so disabled and suffering, and yet still being true to its nature, yapping at the passers-by. So, being a Buddhist, and with this compassion to ease this creature of its suffering, he pondered. But of course, being a Buddhist and following the precepts of non-himsa, non-hurting, he couldn't pick off the maggots from the dog's back, because that would kill the maggots and take away their source of food. So the only thing he thought that he could do would be to remove them with his tongue. So he knelt down by the suffering dog, and closing his eyes so that he wouldn't see the rotting flesh, and he bent down. But when he bent down, instead of his tongue reaching the maggoty, pussy back of the dog, his tongue was in the sand. So he opened his eyes, and all of a sudden there was a great effulgence, and standing before him was the great godly saint Ashoka. And the seeker said, why didn't you appear to me before, after all of these years? And the saint said, your great act of compassion has removed the final veils of karma from your eyes so that you're able to see me. But if you doubt your perception, put me on your shoulder and take me into town. So this the seeker did. He put this effulgent being on his shoulder, and he walked into town, and he asked everyone, can you see my God on my shoulder? And they all thought he was mad and ran away from him, except one old woman whose karma had been burned to a certain degree, who looked at him and said, oh, you've got the dead carcass of a rotting dog on your shoulder. The second story is that story about the seeker after enlightenment. And he heard that a great and illustrious Llama was coming into town. So taking his white scarf to give reverence to the great teacher and being, he went to where everyone was gathered and got in line. And finally, when he came before the Llama, the Llama asked him, what is it that you want? And he said, I'm seeking enlightenment. Oh, said the Llama, well, if you go into seclusion up the mountain and you say these certain chants and follow these certain rituals, you're sure to be enlightened. So the man let go his livelihood and his life, and he went and found a cave in the mountains where he sat, and he followed exactly what the Llama had told him to do. He meditated, he chanted, he went about the rituals. And time passed, many years passed, and still he wasn't enlightened. So, of course, the villagers would bring him food from time to time, and it came to his ears that the great Llama was coming back into town. So again, taking his white scarf to give reverence to the teacher, he went down and got in line, and when it came his turn to be in front of the Llama, he said, I've followed exactly what it was that you told me to do. I've been meditating and chanting for the last 30 years, and still I haven't attained enlightenment. And the Llama said, well, what did I tell you? And he said, well, you told me that I had to do these chants and follow these rituals and practice this meditation. Oh, said the Llama, that's terribly wrong. I told you the wrong thing. Now you'll never get enlightened. So the man was completely shattered. What am I to do? But of course, 30 years he didn't know anything else. So he decided that all he could do was to go back to his cave and sit and do his chanting and his meditations and his rituals again. So he made his way back up the mountains. This terrible state. And when he walked into his cave, the stones of the cave were alive and dancing in front of his eyes. And when he turned around and came out and looked out down into the valley where the village was, there it was, alive, in ways that he had never ever seen before. So the question that's asked, what's the difference or similarity between these two stories? What's our experience of this? One, after our journeying a wave of compassion, so great. And then in the second, a shattering, dropping, complete annihilation of just the similarity or the difference from our experience between these two.
Stopping to striving. It's still doing what we need to do.
Right.
Which is quite odd, because in some ways the teachings talk about, focus and single-mindedness, and yet you hear stories again and again of people that have been trying really hard, but something changes and
Yes.
when they let go of it all.
Yes. And what about in our own lives? We've done that. We've prostrated, we've prayed, we've been through our tribulations that haven't we?
When both of them actually went out of the cave or wherever they were into life, that was put forward into, wasn't while I was sitting in the cave and doing.
No, but before that, what was it that occurred in both instances? Surrender. Yes. I can't do this anymore. Up the mountain, it's hopeless, it's useless. There's all this praying, all this prostrating, all of this. But what's the difference then between what we would perceive from the stories as being a wave of compassion come over him, and then the man seeker going into the cave in this state of emptiness and seeing everything different? What's our experience of that? And has it changed in our lives? When we've surrendered, we've been emptied, I can't do this. Has it been different? One, a wave of compassion which brings an effulgence, an appearance, an epiphany, you might call it. And the other, just that shift, so all of a sudden everything is alive and dancing with life, so to speak.
Part of the difference is with that striving, it's sort of a self-motivated thing, and you kind of step out of that and something else.
And something happened. Something inevitably happened. But was it always the same? And how is it different then to what it is now in our life when we have this state of, as we do, this feeling of cessation of movement? It's different, isn't it? What's the difference then? It's an important question for us, a very important question for us.
for me, it's sort of understanding, or something shifts in knowing that everything has its place, and that even our suffering is it's just part of it all, I suppose. I don't quite know the words to put to it. So it's not something. So it's something to be joyous about.
Yes, right.
So it shifts from, I don't know, to a place of gratitude, I suppose.
So it's like ego exclusion and perception of the ego of what's going on that doesn't come in.
Yes.
You know everything just is. There's no ego there to say, oh, this hurts, this is wrong, this is right.
Yes. Yes.
Judgment is
Yes. Yes.
I find when I go to the school, when I go to school, I have to talk to myself before I get there. Otherwise, I'm likely to fall into a trap, because the whole system is a trap for me.
Yes. Yes.
And the expectation, of what I have to do as the job. But if I remind myself before I get there, your job is to have a good day with those kids.
Right.
That they have a good day with you.
Right.
That's your only job.
Yes.
It's what you were talking about the other day, about your will, not mine.
Yes.
Basically, seems to be just, I don't know where it happens. It just
No.
is.
So a key word really is expectation, isn't it? Because we find that our expectation is going to colour our perception, isn't it? And it's like these people, we've just been revisiting this wonderful book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, and we can say that these epiphanies are the same, light, but depending on the background of the person who's having the experience, the belief system, it's going to be a Jesus Christ, or it's going to be light, or it's going to be a Buddha, or it's going to be oneness. So what's the difference now when our programming, our belief systems have all, which we can call karma, is a coloration, isn't it? Has been removed, effectively removed. The veils, as they're called, are nothing more than a conditioning, in whatever form it might take. So we can then very well gauge where we're at in relationship to that, and receive confirmation that we do not have anything that's going to colour our perceptions.
Yeah, it came up in life. When I was going to America and everyone saying, are you excited, what are you going to do? And then I was like, no, there was nothing there.
Yes.
I got back and everyone's going, how was it? And it was like, was it what you expected?
Well,
I didn't
have any expectation.
But it was far more than little mind could even expect.
Yes,
You know what
yes,
I mean?
yes.
It was far deeper than any expectation you could have had, but that was when life gave me the awareness that, wow, I wasn't getting excited, I had no expectation.
No. So everything, you put you in the childlike state. Yes, yes, yes.
That moment that happened.
Yes.
It's about our mind saying, well, I don't want to go there.
No.
And,
Yes.
but there was a battle before that for a year. Someone, no, not this one.
Yes, 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 yes.
And that was the breaking down
Of that before you
fear
go.
of stepping out there.
For sure. But yes, it's quite a realization for us, isn't it, to live in a state of absence of expectation of ourselves or others. And what does that leave us with, as it's depicted in the second story? Aliveness. Everything becomes alive.
It's so funny about the veil. Oh, when I went to India, I just noticed it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That veil of it's just resistance, and it's active over here, and you can't get through to what you want to get through to because you know you're driven by all that stuff in the mind.
Yes. Mm.
And I know I went to Tiruvannamalai, and it's sort of a holy town, right? A holy mountain. Actually, the ashram hasn't changed, which was beautiful to see. But I was so bored.
Mm.
Why? Because that's what causes me boredom. Just to sit and there was nothing particularly to do. I made up my mind I was going to stay in Tiruvannamalai. Everybody else stays for a while. Oh, I think I'll go to Goa. Oh, I think I'll go north. I'll go here. I'll go there. They were getting some excitement.
Mm.
Well, I wanted excitement too. I mean, my mind wanted. But I finally found a library which saved my life basically, because I just got books to read, which kept my mind happy, you know. Kind of, that's okay, just go ahead. But every day it was like the same old, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go to a new place, like a satsang with this lady, the first day I went, I was, you know, a little, I don't know. And I was aware of pulling back, and I wanted to just be there. You can't just kind of manufacture innocence.
Mm.
I mean, when you have that resistance, it's like it stops you.
Mm.
So you have to just wait until it goes.
Mm.
And I think I only had maybe 1 or 2 days where I felt it kind of relaxed and something else more true took over.
Mm.
And the rest of the time was just one foot in front of the
Yeah,
other.
one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
Mm.
But I had one night at the ashram, just one, because I stayed there for a week at the beginning and, you know, waited for the meals. That's what I was doing, basically, waiting. And I went and sat in the meditation room, and I found myself smiling, and I said, oh, this is nice. And then I felt, oh, well, look, time to, you know, I kept moving on.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing particularly happened, of course.
Mm.
And one night, the night before I left, not the night right before I left, but the night before I left. So it still had that feeling of leaving, which kind of wakes you up and you feel like, well, this isn't going to be here available anymore. I'm leaving. And a lot of things happened, which kind of, you know, were emotional and it came kind of much more alive for me. And it was the same place.